Please, don't look at me like that. Her voice broke softly against the hum of rain. Thunder rolled across the Lagos sky, echoing through the marble halls of Minute Khan's mansion, a sprawling palace of glass, steel, and loneliness. Candlelight trembled on the walls, painting them in gold and shadow. Outside, the storm pawed like a secret refusing to be kept. He didn't answer. He just stood there, suit jacket draped over his arm, tie hanging loose, eyes steady but unsure. For a man everyone called cold, tonight he looked human. The air between them carried too much rain, silence, unspoken thoughts. Adora Johnson gripped the edge of the counter, pretending to focus on the flickering flame instead of his reflection in the glass. Hello, family. Before we continue, I have a small request. Please subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's go back to that night. The night the rain refused to stop. The night that would change everything. Adora was supposed to be gone hours ago. The other maids had left early, flood warnings again. But her bus never came, and the streets had turned into small rivers. So she stayed behind, wiping the grand dining table one last time, praying the storm would ease. Then she heard the heavy door open. Minute Khan, the Korean billionaire everyone in Lagos whispered about, had returned from a late meeting. His black hair was damp, his navy blue coat dotted with rain. Even tired, he carried that quiet authority people either respected or feared. "You're still here?" he asked, voice low, eyes unreadable. "The rain, sir," Ada murmured. "It's too bad outside. I'll wait it out." He nodded slowly. "Good. It's safer here." She wasn't sure why his voice sounded kind. Usually, he was polite but distant, the type who spoke in measured tones and signed checks without smiling. But tonight, there was something softer in the way he said her name. Something tired. Something real. He walked to the bar and poured himself a glass of red wine. After a pause, he poured another. "Have one with me," he said. Ada's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't." "It's just wine," he interrupted gently. "And it's raining. Neither of us has anywhere to go." The words hung in the air, simple, harmless. But something about them felt dangerous. She hesitated, then took the glass. Their fingers brushed, brief but electric. They sat across from each other, storm outside, candlelight inside. At first, they spoke about safe things, Lagos traffic, the noise of the city, how rain in Nigeria was louder than in Seoul. He laughed once, softly, like someone who hadn't laughed in a long time. Then the questions changed. "Do you like working here?" "I'm grateful," she said quietly. "Even when it gets lonely." He nodded, eyes distant. Loneliness doesn't care about money either. That line stayed in her heart longer than it should have. Lightning flashed. The lights blinked out. The mansion went silent except for the rain. Candlelight painted his face, the sharp edges, the faint scar near his jaw, the sadness in his gaze. He wasn't the man from the headlines anymore. He was just a man. He moved closer, instinctively. She didn't move away. They talked for hours, about dreams and regrets. He told her about his father's company. She told him about her mother's small store back home. It felt strange, how easily words turned into laughter, and laughter into silence. At one point, thunder cracked again, and she jumped. His hand reached out, steadying hers. For a moment, neither spoke. He whispered, "You're trembling." "So are you," she replied. That silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy with everything they weren't supposed to feel. He didn't touch her again, not yet. But he looked at her like someone seeing sunlight after too long in the dark. And somewhere between another flash of lightning and the soft flicker of the candle, the world shifted. The storm outside grew quieter. The house felt smaller. The distance between them disappeared, not because they planned it, but because loneliness sometimes speaks louder than reason. When dawn finally came, the rain stopped. The city outside was calm again. But Adora was gone. Only her resignation letter remained on the kitchen counter, written in neat, trembling handwriting. "Thank you for everything. Please don't look for me." Minute stood there, holding the letter like it might burn his hand. He didn't know it yet, but that single night, the night filled with thunder, wine, and quiet confession, was only the beginning. She left. The butler's voice cracked in disbelief. Minute didn't answer. He just stared at the letter on the marble counter, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt gray. The driveway was quiet except for the drip of water from the mansion's eaves. Adeora's absence filled the house like a shadow, heavy, silent, impossible to ignore. He read the note again. Thank you for everything. Please don't look for me. And he whispered to himself, but I already have. 4 days, Minute tried to forget. But forgetting is a lie rich people tell themselves, a distraction made of meetings, contracts, and noise. He returned to his routine. Boardrooms replaced candlelight, numbers replaced faces. He buried himself in work, hoping the next deal, the next signature, would silence the echo of her laugh. But at night, when the city lights blinked through his penthouse windows, he'd remember that storm, the way she said so like it meant both respect and distance. He remembered her trembling hands when the thunder shook the glass. He remembered the way her eyes softened when he smiled, the one time he had smiled and meant it. The world saw Minute Han, billionaire heir to Han Group, a man of discipline, of control, of quiet arrogance. But inside, he was a man haunted by a single night that felt too real to dismiss and too wrong to remember aloud. His mother noticed first. You look thinner, she said one morning during breakfast. Just work, mother, he replied without looking up. Work doesn't make your eyes look like that. He said nothing. Because how do you explain to your mother, a woman who believed in duty, in reputation, in keeping emotions hidden behind etiquette, that your heart was somewhere between guilt and longing? He told himself she'd moved on. Maybe she found a better job. Maybe she was safe. But part of him hoped, foolishly, that she hadn't forgotten either. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian Johnson was learning to breathe again. Her new apartment was small, nothing like the polished walls of the Han mansion. The ceiling fan squeaked, the lights flickered, and her paycheck barely covered rent. But it was hers. Every morning, she walked to the daycare where she worked part-time, helping children draw with crayons and learn their ABCs. She smiled often, but it wasn't the same smile from before. There were nights when she woke up crying, not because of regret, but because of confusion. Had she imagined it, the way he'd looked at her, the softness in his voice? She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself it was just one night. But some lies are too kind to believe for long. Sometimes she'd see his photo in a newspaper. Han Group expands operations in West Africa. His suit perfect, his expression calm, as if nothing had ever happened. She would fold the paper quietly, whispering, "Good for you, Mr. Han," before throwing it away. Yet there were moments, late at night, when her hands would rest over her chest and she'd think, I shouldn't have gone that close. I shouldn't have let him in. Then she'd remember his words, loneliness doesn't care about money either. And her heart would ache all over again. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into 2 long years. They never met again. Not once. Not by accident. Not by chance. Minute's company grew. Ada's life stabilized. But both carried that storm like a scar. He tried dating, briefly, but no one ever made him forget that night. She tried praying it away, convincing herself it meant nothing. But sometimes, on rainy evenings, she'd pause at her window and whisper, "If you remember me, just don't say it out loud." Some nights don't end when the sun rises. Some nights live on, in the silence, in the guilt, in the memories that won't fade. It's been 2 years since that storm, and neither of them knows what's waiting ahead. Before we go on, please subscribe. Tell us where you're watching from. I see you, family from Lagos, Seoul, London. Thank you for being here. But fate, oh, fate never sleeps. Because just when you think the past has buried itself, it knocks again. Next week, the Han Foundation would launch a new charity renovation project in Lagos, a community center near the mainland. And when Minute arrived for inspection that morning, clipboard in hand, his world would stop. Because across the hall, organizing volunteers, laughing softly at something someone said, was Adrian Johnson. 2 years later, same eyes, same quiet strength, same storm, waiting to begin again. Good afternoon, Mr. Han. Her voice was calm. Too calm. And for a man who'd built empires, Minute suddenly forgot how to breathe. 2 years. 2 long years since that storm. Since the night he told himself to forget. And there she was, Adrian Johnson, standing in the middle of the renovated community center, clipboard in hand, sunlight pouring through the open windows behind her. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Minute blinked, trying to find words. You work here? Ada nodded, steady as ever. Yes, sir. I coordinate the volunteer schedules for the Han Foundation project. The words hit him, Han Foundation. His company. His project. Her job. Fate had a sense of humor, and apparently, it was cruel. He cleared his throat. I didn't expect. Neither did I, she said quickly, eyes flicking back to the volunteers arranging paint buckets. Her tone was polite, professional, distant. It was as if that night never happened. But her hands were trembling slightly. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Days turned into weeks, and Minute kept finding excuses to visit the site. One afternoon, he arrived with bottled water for the volunteers. Another day, he came with an architect to inspect the structure. Nobody asked why the CEO himself needed to supervise wall colors, but everyone whispered. And every time, Ada would greet him the same way, a polite nod, a soft good afternoon, Mr. Han. No more. No less. Yet every glance lasted a little longer. Every conversation ended a little slower. He told himself it was nothing. He was just checking progress. But his heart didn't believe him. It was a humid Friday when everything changed. Power had gone out again. The lights flickered and died just as volunteers packed up to leave. Ma, we're locking up, a young man called from outside. Ada nodded. We'll be right behind you. She turned to gather the remaining files from the desk. At the same moment, Minute reached for the same folder. Their hands brushed. That simple. That soft. And yet it felt like thunder again. Neither moved. Neither spoke. He looked down at her, the woman who once worked in his house, who'd vanished without a word, who'd haunted him every night since. She looked up, at the man who once made her believe in kindness, then reminded her how fragile hearts can be. For a moment, the entire world paused. Then she smiled faintly, a careful, practiced smile. Thank you, sir. I'll take it from here. He hesitated. His voice dropped, quiet and honest. Ada, I didn't know you were here. If I had. It's fine, she interrupted, tone firm. It's work. That's all. But he saw it, that flicker in her eyes, the one that said it wasn't fine. Not at all. She turned toward the door, rain already whispering against the windows. Be safe, he said softly. You too, sir. And just like that, she was gone again. That night, Minute sat in his car for almost an hour before driving home. He could still hear her voice, formal, distant, familiar. 2 years had passed, and she'd changed. But something inside him knew, the space she left in his life had never really closed. He leaned his head against the steering wheel and whispered to himself. You can build 100 skyscrapers, Minute, but you can't rebuild what you lost that night. Meanwhile, Ada sat on her couch, staring at her phone, the rain outside tapping against her window. She should have felt nothing. That was the plan. But why did her heart still beat faster every time she thought of him? She whispered to herself, it was just one night. Just one mistake. You promised yourself you'd never go back there. Yet she couldn't shake the way he looked at her, like time itself had stopped. She turned off the light, lay down, and closed her eyes. But dreams have a way of ignoring promises. Some people leave, but their memory stays like perfume on your skin, faint, familiar, impossible to wash away. 2 years may pass, but the heart never forgets where it left its peace. The next day, rain returned. The volunteers cancelled early. And once again, Ada and Minute would find themselves alone, just the two of them and the sound of thunder outside. History was repeating itself. But this time, forgiveness waited at the door. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join our story family. Every subscription keeps these stories coming. You waited. Her voice trembled as thunder rolled outside the community center. Minute stood by the door, coat draped over one arm, hair slightly damp from the storm. The volunteers had gone home early, the lights flickered again, and the two of them were the only souls left inside the quiet hall. Yes, he said softly. I didn't want you to walk alone. Rain hammered the roof like a heartbeat. Ada looked away, clutching the edge of the table as if it could steady her. The storm outside sounded too familiar, too much like that night. Ada exhaled slowly. You don't have to keep doing this, Mr. Han. Coming here, waiting, pretending like. I'm not pretending. His tone was firm, but quiet. I owe you an apology. She froze. The air shifted. For what? She asked, her voice a whisper. For everything, he said. For that night. For how I handled it. For the silence that followed. He took a hesitant step forward. I told myself you wanted to disappear. But the truth is, I was too ashamed to look for you. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. I was angry back then, Ada said, her words soft but steady. Angry at you. Angry at myself. I thought walking away would fix it. He nodded slowly, eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, sincerity. Maybe we both tried to run from the same thing. The rain outside softened, becoming more of a rhythm than a roar. Ada looked up. You've changed. He smiled faintly. So have you. The silence between them felt different this time, not sharp or heavy, but full. She stepped closer, not sure why. Maybe because for the first time, she didn't feel small next to him. He watched her, his gaze steady but gentle. I never stopped thinking about you, Ada, he said. Every time it rained, I remembered your face. That storm didn't end when you left, it stayed with me. Her lips parted, the words catching in her throat. You shouldn't say that. Why not? Because it hurts, she whispered. He took another step. The distance between them was now just a breath, a heartbeat. I don't want to hurt you, he said. I just want to be honest. The candle on the table flickered, the flame bending between them like it couldn't decide which way to lean. Ada's eyes glistened. You think saying sorry can undo what happened? No, he replied, voice quiet but sure. But maybe it can stop us from pretending we never cared. For a long time, neither spoke. The rain fell steady and soft, like the world itself was listening. Then she whispered, I forgive you. Just that. 3 words that didn't sound like surrender. They sounded like freedom. He closed his eyes, letting out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. When he opened them again, his expression was unreadable, a man holding gratitude, guilt, and relief all at once. Thank you, he said quietly. That's more than I deserve. Ada shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's just time. For a moment, the only sound was rain on the roof and the soft hum of the generator. He didn't touch her, not really, just brushed a raindrop from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was small, but it felt like the whole world had stopped to watch. Her breath caught, and she closed her eyes. It wasn't passion that filled the room, it was something quieter, deeper. The kind of tenderness that only comes when 2 hearts stop fighting and finally rest beside each other. They stood that way for a while, not needing words. The storm outside had calmed, but inside, something new had begun, not a fire, but a warmth that could last. When she finally pulled back, she whispered, It's late. You should go. He smiled gently. Only if you promise you'll be here tomorrow. Ada hesitated, then nodded. Tomorrow. He left with that word echoing in his mind. Tomorrow, a promise, a prayer, and maybe, a new beginning. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it gives love a chance to survive it. Sometimes healing isn't loud, it's quiet. It's 2 people standing in the rain and realizing they can start again. Minute Hugh, there's something I need to tell you. Her voice was small, breaking through the gentle sound of rain against the window. It had been weeks since that night of forgiveness, weeks of quiet conversations, shared laughter, and peace that neither of them had felt in years. The tension between them had softened into something fragile, something almost like happiness. But tonight, Ada couldn't smile. Her hands shook as she held a small brown envelope close to her chest. Minute Hugh noticed. Ada, he said softly, what's wrong? She took a deep breath. Please, just listen first. Ada's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a small photograph, creased from being held too many times. She handed it to him without a word. Minute Hugh looked down. A little boy stared back at him, bright eyes, soft curls, a smile that looked too familiar. His name is Daniel, Ada whispered. He's 2 years old. For a second, Minute Hugh couldn't breathe. His world tilted, like the ground beneath him had disappeared. My son. Ada nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I wanted to tell you before, but I was scared. You were building your empire, and I was trying to survive. I didn't want to be a problem you needed to fix. He stared at the photograph again. The boy's eyes were his, exactly his. The curve of the smile, the quiet confidence, even at 2, it was unmistakable. You raised him alone? He asked quietly. I did what I had to, she replied. But I don't want to keep lying. You deserve to know. He sat down slowly, emotions flooding his face, disbelief, shock, guilt, wonder. You should have told me sooner. I know, she whispered. But I wasn't sure if I could trust what we had anymore. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. You can trust me now. For a moment, it felt like the past had finally healed. Like maybe this was how fate made things right, not with grand gestures, but with truth. He smiled faintly through the tears that had begun to gather in his eyes. I want to meet him. Ada nodded, relief mixing with fear. You will. Soon. She looked lighter, freer, like she had just dropped a secret that had been too heavy for too long. Minute leaned back, staring at the photo again. Daniel, he murmured. He even looks like my father. Ada laughed softly, wiping her eyes. Everyone says that. He took a deep breath and whispered, Thank you, Ada, for telling me. We'll do this together. She smiled weakly. I hope so. Later that night, Minute sat in his study, unable to sleep. The photograph lay on his desk beside a small silver frame he'd bought for it. His heart told him it was true, that this was his son. But his mind, the businessman in him, the man who lived by evidence, needed to be sure. He made a single call. Send me a DNA test kit, he said quietly, discreetly. The next morning, he delivered the sealed envelope to the lab himself. Days later, the results arrived, a plain white envelope stamped confidential. He opened it slowly, his breath catching in his throat as his eyes scanned the paper. Then he froze. Paternity test result, 0% probability of biological relationship. He read it twice, 3 times. The letters didn't change. The paper slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. No, that can't be right. His pulse roared in his ears. Memories crashed through his mind, her trembling confession, the fear in her voice, the tears, the boy's eyes. He sank into the chair, face pale, heart pounding. If Daniel wasn't his, then whose was he? Outside, thunder rolled again, loud, endless, just like the night they first met. And somewhere in the city, Ada sat alone, clutching her phone, staring at a message she hadn't yet sent. A message that read, We need to talk. There's something else you don't know.